Beloved one, be still for one quiet moment, not because the world has stopped, but because something gentle has already begun moving in your direction, and if you rush past this instant, you may overlook the meaning hidden inside it. There is a conversation you never expected, spoken in a place you could not see, where your name appeared with surprising warmth. The person you love did not speak with perfect answers. They spoke with honest wonder. They searched for words that could explain why your presence has lingered in their thoughts far longer than they ever intended. Then the other voice answered with unexpected calm, saying something so simple that it changed the silence between them. Don't skip, because the heart of this story has not revealed itself yet. Sometimes the smallest sentence becomes the doorway to the greatest realization. The person listening leaned back for a moment, almost smiling without knowing why, because they had never looked at you from that angle before. They began remembering tiny details they once ignored, the patience you showed when nobody noticed, the quiet kindness hidden inside ordinary moments, the strength you carried without asking anyone to applaud it. One memory led to another until they realized they had been collecting pieces of your story without understanding the picture those pieces were creating. Stay till the end, something important is waiting for you. There are moments in life when another person's perspective quietly unlocks a truth we could never discover alone. That is exactly what happened. The conversation slowly became less about your past and more about the person you are becoming. It was not filled with dramatic promises or impossible predictions. Instead, it carried something much deeper, a peaceful certainty that some people leave an imprint simply by remaining true to who they are. Those words settled into the heart of the one you love, and for the first time in a long while, they stopped questioning whether your connection mattered. They began asking a completely different question. What have they failed to notice until now? That question refused to leave them. Even after the conversation ended, it echoed quietly through every thought they carried home. Every ordinary moment suddenly reminded them of something unfinished, something they wanted to understand before another day passed. And while they searched for that answer, another unexpected detail quietly surfaced, a detail they never intended to tell anyone, yet it may change everything in the next upcoming words. There is something unusual about the silence that followed. It did not feel empty. It felt as though every unanswered thought had gathered in one place, waiting for the right moment to be understood. The person you love walked away from that conversation, yet those words refused to stay behind. They replayed every sentence again and again, not searching for proof, but searching for meaning. What they had heard was not loud, not dramatic, and not designed to impress anyone. It was quiet enough to slip past ordinary attention, yet powerful enough to remain in the heart long after the voices had faded. Don't skip, because this is where everything begins to unfold in a way neither of you expected. They found themselves remembering the moments that once seemed too ordinary to matter. A smile you offered without expecting anything in return. A conversation that ended before the most important words could be spoken. A look that lasted only a second, yet somehow stayed with them for far longer than they ever admitted. One by one, these memories returned with a completely different meaning. It was as though someone had gently turned a key, allowing them to see what had always been there but had never fully come into focus. Then another realization quietly appeared. The person they had spoken with never tried to convince them to feel anything. They simply asked one unexpected question. Have you ever noticed how peaceful you become whenever you talk about them? Those words landed deeper than expected. They paused, because they could not deny it. Every time your name entered the conversation, their voice softened without them realizing it. Every time they remembered you, the weight they had been carrying seemed a little lighter. It wasn't excitement alone. It was comfort. It was familiarity. It was the quiet feeling that some connections continue growing even during seasons of distance. Stay till the end, because something important is waiting for you. As evening settled around them, they stopped looking at old memories with regret and started looking at them with gratitude. Instead of asking what had gone wrong, they wondered what beautiful chapter might still be waiting to begin. That single shift changed everything inside them. They understood that meaningful connections are rarely built in one unforgettable moment. They are built through countless small moments that only reveal their value when viewed together. And as this understanding settled into their heart, they made a quiet decision they told no one about. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't an impulsive choice. It was something much more thoughtful, a decision that could quietly reshape the path between you both. But before they acted, one final conversation unexpectedly found its way to them, and what was said next left them completely speechless. A quiet shift had already begun before anyone could put it into words. The person you love woke with an unfamiliar sense that something unfinished was gently calling for their attention. They tried to focus on the ordinary rhythm of the day, yet every path their thoughts followed somehow led back to you. It was not because someone kept reminding them. It was because the conversation they had carried in their heart was still unfolding inside them, revealing new meaning with every passing hour. Don't skip, because what seemed like a simple exchange was becoming something far more personal. They remembered one sentence they almost overlooked. Sometimes the people who change our lives the most are the ones who never ask to be noticed. Those words settled quietly within them. They began asking themselves whether they had mistaken quietness for distance, or patience for absence. Suddenly, moments they once dismissed appeared brighter than before. They remembered how your kindness never demanded recognition, how your presence often brought peace instead of noise, and how even the smallest gestures carried a sincerity that could not be imitated. The more they reflected, the more another realization gently emerged. They had spent so much time waiting for extraordinary signs that they had nearly missed the extraordinary beauty hidden inside ordinary moments. Stay till the end, something important is waiting for you. They found themselves smiling at memories that once seemed insignificant. A few simple words. A shared laugh. A brief pause that somehow said more than an entire conversation. Those memories no longer felt random. Together they formed a story they had never taken the time to read completely. As the day continued, they crossed paths with someone who knew nothing about the earlier conversation. Yet without intending to, this person mentioned something that felt strangely familiar. They spoke about how genuine connections are rarely loud at the beginning. They often grow quietly, becoming stronger while nobody is paying attention. Hearing those words from a completely different voice felt impossible to ignore. It was as though life itself was gently repeating the same message until they were finally ready to receive it. In that moment, they stopped asking whether they should understand you. Instead, they began wondering how they could honor what had always been quietly growing between you. Their heart was no longer searching for certainty through grand answers. It had begun trusting the steady peace that appeared whenever your name entered their thoughts. And just when they believed they had finally understood everything, they noticed one forgotten detail connected to your past, a detail so small it had been invisible until now, yet it held the missing piece they never knew they were searching for. That discovery is where the next chapter truly begins. Without warning, one forgotten detail returned at exactly the right moment. It was not hidden inside an old photograph or a message waiting to be reopened. It appeared in a memory so ordinary that it had never seemed important before. Yet this time, they could not move past it. They stayed with it. They listened to what it had been quietly saying all along. Don't skip, because sometimes the smallest memory carries the greatest meaning. They remembered the way you once spoke about hope, not with grand promises, but with a quiet confidence that brighter days were always worth believing in. At the time, those words had simply drifted by like countless others. Now they echoed differently. They realized your strength had never come from trying to impress anyone. It came from remaining true to yourself even when no one was watching. That realization settled deeply within them, and for the first time they understood why thoughts of you never seemed to disappear for very long. As the evening grew quieter, another unexpected conversation unfolded. This time, they were not asking questions. They were simply listening. The person beside them smiled gently and said, "You keep describing the same person, but every time you do, your eyes become brighter." Those words were followed by a long silence. Not an uncomfortable silence, but one filled with understanding. It was in that quiet space that they finally admitted something they had been unable to say aloud before. They had been trying to explain you with logic, when the answer had always been found in how you made them feel. Stay till the end, something important is waiting for you. They began noticing little reminders throughout the day. A familiar phrase. A melody they had almost forgotten. A place that suddenly felt connected to a memory of you. None of these moments demanded attention, yet together they formed a gentle pattern that was impossible to ignore. Instead of brushing them aside, they welcomed them with gratitude, realizing that meaningful connections often reveal themselves through simple moments repeated over time. That night, they sat quietly, no longer searching for perfect words. They simply allowed themselves to feel thankful that your path had crossed theirs at all. And in that peaceful reflection, one final thought appeared with surprising clarity. There was something they had never told you. Not because they wanted to keep it hidden, but because they had only just found the courage to understand it themselves. Those unspoken words rested quietly in their heart, waiting for the right moment to be shared, and the way they choose that moment will change everything that follows. A single quiet decision can begin long before anyone notices it. That is exactly where this moment begins. The person you love was no longer trying to silence their thoughts about you. Instead, they allowed every memory to settle naturally, as though each one had been waiting for permission to speak. And the more they listened, the clearer one truth became. They had not been holding on to the past. They had been slowly discovering the value of someone they never fully understood until now. Don't skip, because the next realization arrived in the gentlest way imaginable. As they looked back over everything that had happened, they noticed a pattern that had escaped them before. Whenever life became confusing, your memory brought unexpected clarity. Whenever they felt uncertain, they remembered the calmness you carried even during ordinary conversations. It wasn't about perfect moments. It was about the quiet consistency that had always surrounded you. Suddenly they understood that peace has a way of leaving fingerprints on the people who experience it, even if they don't recognize them immediately. Then something unexpected happened. Someone asked them a simple question. If they stood in front of you right now, what would you say first? They expected an answer to appear instantly, but none came. Not because they had nothing to say, but because there was too much. Every sentence felt too small for everything their heart had been carrying. They smiled softly, lowered their eyes for a moment, and realized the first words would not need to be extraordinary. They would only need to be honest. Stay till the end, because something important is waiting for you. That evening, they opened their notes, thinking they would write only a few lines. Instead, page after page filled with thoughts they had never shared with anyone. They wrote about the little things they admired but never mentioned. They wrote about moments they wished they had appreciated more. They wrote about how your quiet strength had inspired them in ways they never expected. None of it was written to impress you. It was written because their heart could no longer pretend those feelings had never existed. As they reached the final line, their hands stopped. They looked at everything they had written, and one sentence stood apart from all the others. It was short. It was sincere. It carried more meaning than every paragraph before it. They whispered it once, almost as if they were testing whether it was finally true. The moment they heard those words aloud, they knew there was no turning back. What they had been trying to understand for so long had finally become clear. But there was one thing they still didn't know. Whether you were already beginning to sense the same quiet change from where you are. And the answer to that question begins with the very next moment. The next morning arrived without fanfare, yet everything felt slightly different. Nothing around them had visibly changed, but something within them had found a quiet sense of direction. They no longer searched for signs in every passing moment. Instead, they trusted the steady feeling that had continued growing since that unforgettable conversation. It was calm. It was genuine. And for the first time, it no longer felt uncertain. Don't skip, because this is where the story gently turns in a direction neither of you could have expected. They carried that unwritten message with them throughout the day, reading it only in their mind. Every time they reached the final sentence, they paused. Not because they doubted the words, but because they wanted the moment to be worthy of them. They had learned that meaningful words are not measured by how quickly they are spoken. They are remembered because of the heart that carries them. Then something beautifully unexpected happened. While speaking with someone else, your name came up once again. This time, there were no questions, no confusion, and no hesitation. The person simply smiled and said, "You seem different whenever you talk about them." For a moment, they didn't answer. Then they quietly replied, "Maybe I've finally started seeing what was always there." Those words surprised even them. Stay till the end, because something important is waiting for you. As the hours passed, they began noticing how often life had quietly placed opportunities in front of them to appreciate you, yet they had been too distracted to recognize them. Now those moments returned with remarkable clarity. A shared conversation. A kind gesture. A moment of encouragement. They realized none of those memories had disappeared. They had simply been waiting for the right season to reveal their true value. That evening, they stood beneath an open sky and allowed themselves one honest thought. What if this connection was never about perfect timing? The question lingered peacefully. Perhaps it had always been about becoming the kind of person who could truly value what had been placed before them. That realization brought a quiet smile. Not because every answer had arrived, but because they finally understood which direction their heart wanted to follow. And just as they were ready to take the first genuine step forward, something entirely unexpected reached them. It wasn't a message. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a simple piece of information about you, shared by someone who had no idea how deeply it would be received. The moment those words were spoken, everything they believed they understood was gently expanded once again. And what they learned next became the reason they could no longer keep their feelings locked away. Just when they believed the story had reached its quiet conclusion, another chapter opened without asking for attention. It arrived through the simplest conversation of all. Someone mentioned you in passing, with no intention of creating a turning point, yet every word carried unexpected weight. They listened carefully, not because they expected a revelation, but because something inside them whispered that this moment mattered. The voice continued gently, describing the way you encourage others without expecting recognition, the way you remain steady even when life becomes uncertain, and the way your kindness often speaks before your words ever do. None of it sounded exaggerated. None of it felt like praise for the sake of praise. It felt real. It felt honest. And that honesty reached a place in their heart that had remained untouched for a very long time. Don't skip. Because this final realization has been quietly forming since the very beginning. They stood in silence after hearing those words. Not because they were surprised that you possessed those qualities, but because they suddenly understood how many opportunities they had missed to say thank you. They realized admiration had been growing quietly inside them while they were too busy searching for something louder, something more obvious. Yet the greatest truths rarely arrive with noise. They arrive softly, asking only to be noticed. Stay till the end, something important is waiting for you. In that moment, they stopped wondering whether they should reach out someday. They began wondering why they had waited so long to appreciate what had always been meaningful. The distance they once imagined between you no longer felt as wide. It felt like a bridge waiting for one sincere step. Then they unfolded the words they had written days earlier. They read them slowly, allowing every sentence to breathe. When they reached the final line, they smiled, not because it was perfect, but because it was true. For the first time, nothing needed to be added. Nothing needed to be hidden. They quietly whispered, "They deserve to know what they've meant to me." Those words did not come from excitement alone. They came from clarity. And perhaps that is the hidden truth this journey has been leading toward all along. Sometimes the most meaningful conversation about you happens when you are not in the room. Sometimes the person you love needs someone else's perspective before they fully recognize what their own heart has been trying to say. And sometimes, the greatest change does not begin with dramatic moments. It begins with one honest conversation. One quiet realization. And one courageous decision to stop letting meaningful words remain unspoken. That decision is now closer than ever, and the next time your paths cross, neither heart will be seeing the other in quite the same way again. The story does not end with a decision. It begins with what follows after the heart has finally become honest. In the days that came next, there was no rush, no dramatic chase, no perfect script waiting to be spoken. Instead, there was something far more meaningful, a quiet confidence that had never existed before. The person you love no longer wondered whether your presence had changed them. They knew it had. Every ordinary moment now carried a different kind of awareness. They noticed how often they compared kindness to your kindness, patience to your patience, sincerity to your sincerity. Without realizing it, you had become the measure they used for qualities that truly mattered. That realization did not make them anxious. It made them grateful. Don't skip. Because one final piece of this journey is still waiting for you. One evening, they returned to the place where that first unforgettable conversation had taken place. Nothing about the surroundings had changed. The same quiet atmosphere remained. The same familiar feeling rested in the air. Yet everything felt different because they were no longer the same person who had walked away from there before. They remembered the very first words they had heard about you. Then they remembered every realization that followed. Piece by piece, the entire journey suddenly made perfect sense. It was never about discovering something completely new about you. It was about discovering something completely new within themselves every time they thought about you. Stay till the end, because something important is waiting for you. They smiled, not because every question had been answered, but because they finally understood that some of life's most meaningful connections grow stronger through understanding, gratitude, and quiet courage. They no longer felt the need to force the future. They simply wanted the next meeting, whenever it happened, to be genuine. Before leaving, they spoke one last sentence, quietly enough that only they could hear it. When the moment is right, I won't hide what my heart has learned. Those words carried no pressure. Only peace. And perhaps, without even realizing it, you have been preparing for that same moment in your own way. Because while they were learning how deeply your presence had shaped their heart, you were unknowingly becoming the reason they finally believed that the most beautiful conversations are not the loudest ones. They are the ones that change someone long before they ever speak them aloud. And somewhere beyond today's quiet ending, a new beginning has already taken its first gentle step.